a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, malcontents. My name is David. I am the Malcontent. Today is Monday, April 12, 2021, and I hope you are all doing well this evening. We have a fantastic show prepared for you tonight. Let me pull in my amazing co-host, Jennifer Smith. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening?
Allergies are kicking my butt, but other than that, I'm doing okay. How are you?
We're going to talk how I'm doing. I'm a little today, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But thank you for asking. First thing I wanted to start with is the Dr. Anthony Fauci story from Unite Magazine is in store shelves as of today. You can go to QFC or some other local stores and buy a copy of the extended interview that's in Unite Magazine that was done by Renee Rackety. We aired the video part of that right here in partnership with Unite Seattle.
Yeah, congrats to Renee on that too.
Absolutely. It's like the sun's out, finally.
I know, but it's kind of cold. So I'm excited because I have like all these tank tops and things I want to wear, but it's betraying me because it's not quite warm enough to wear them yet.
Well, Jennifer, the good news is it'll be 70 by the end of the week. And this is when we have to be careful as the mole people not to incinerate our skin. I think we'll see some sunburned people by the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Luckily, my mom's Italian, so I tan pretty good, but right now I'm pretty pasty.
I am really pasty too, and I'm actually shocked at how much sun that I picked up on Sunday, and we'll be talking about Sunday and our coverage of the White Lives Matter counter protest that happened there. I don't want to get ahead of us. So you asked how I was doing. I got my COVID vaccine on Sunday. I was able on Saturday to schedule the Johnson & Johnson. So it's one and done. And as you know, we were in our editorial board meeting and that started at 7:30. We ran about 15 minutes over. It's 1 hour once a week. And right around 8 o'clock, like I started falling off the cliff and damn, like I had chills and a fever for just like 6 or 8 hours. But Jennifer, I got to tell you, if that's just a tiny little taste of COVID, you don't want COVID ever.
Yeah. No, you were getting pretty kind of like peaked looking towards the end of our editorial meeting. So I'm glad you're feeling better though, because I know you were not feeling great even a little later in the evening. So yeah, I definitely think it's a small price to pay for having the vaccination.
I'm definitely feeling better now. The best way that I could describe it is I'm a little tired. I'm a little like I got a little bit of fatigue. I'm kind of achy head to toe. I'm feeling a hell of a lot better than I did, say, 24 hours ago. And I suspect that I will be 100%. And the other thing, Jennifer, my cell phone reception has never been better. Thank you, Bill Gates.
Maybe it'll fix my Wi-Fi issues.
Maybe.
Looking forward to now.
That'll be interesting to see after you get your vax, if the Wi-Fi at your home gets better. The other thing on the subject of COVID, 3 counties got rolled back. We wrote a story that there were 7 counties on the bubble on Friday. Cowlitz, Pearson, Whitman, all going back to phase 2 on the 16th. And they get reevaluated in 2 weeks. Skagit County and King County are right up to the line.
Yeah, so I'm wondering how long it's going to be before King goes back to phase 2.
Get vaccinated, keep wearing a mask, keep socially distancing. Please don't screw this up. We are so close to the friggin' finish line. That's all I got to say about that. Jennifer, you ready for the land acknowledgement and to get the real show started?
I am. Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We are grateful to live and work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working towards repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Thank you so much for that, Jennifer. It is really appreciated. It adds a lot to the show, and it's important to acknowledge the First Peoples of this nation and the debt that we will never be able to repay to them. This is the part of the show where I remind people, spam those hearts. Let the people on Facebook and Twitter know that you appreciate independent journalism by going ahead and spamming those hearts. If you are watching us on Twitch or you're watching us on YouTube, you could just go, hey, I love you guys, or not in a creepy, weird way. And maybe just a big long line of hearts. You could do something like that if you wanted to. And let our mods and admins know in particular, and our research team, and our writers, and our editors, how much you appreciate all the hard work that they do. This is also the part of the show where I always like to remind people the easiest way, it's free. It's totally free to support independent media. Go ahead and share out this stream, or retweet us. Or if you're watching on Twitch and YouTube, go, hey, there's some great content going on here live. You should watch this right now. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started in our first story. Jennifer, a number of far right-wing organizations tried to set up White Lives Matter rallies from coast to coast. They did a bunch of promotion on Telegram and some of the darker corners of the internet. There were people that sent me videos and chats. There's places that we get into and we can read this stuff. And there were dozens and dozens of organizations that were allegedly planning things. But when you started diving into a lot of these groups, you would find no messages at all, or people just trolling. And in Seattle, a total of 2 people showed up for White Lives Matter, but a lot more people showed up to let them know that they were not going to be having their white supremacy on Sunday.
Hi, I'm Annalisa. I'm here with a couple of different groups today. I'm a part of the Comrades of Color Caucus with the Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women. When we heard that there are folks claiming that white lives matter, we're here to say that, Black lives matter and all oppressed folks' lives matter.
This is not a problem that's just going to end tomorrow. It's not going to end a week after that or a month after that. This is a problem that has been going on for centuries, and it is a problem that is going to continue until we bring it to an end.
Because we know when we stand together, we can conquer the fear and force these bigots to retreat. A common thread between all forms of white supremacy and fascism is the drive to put women in their place.
No KKK, no fascist USA? No! These guys were going to hold, the women were going to hold this so-called White Lives Matter rally. They don't tell you one thing. They think that only White Lives Matter.
We are here to say we are the people, the mighty people, anti-racist, anti-fascist, anti-sexist, pro the liberation of all oppressed people.
Whose lives matter?
Black lives matter.
Whose lives matter?
Black lives matter.
Thank you, and solidarity forever.
Jennifer, that was a video from yours truly.
Yeah. I watched a little bit of the stream yesterday, but as you know, I was driving back and forth to Olympia and other things.
Yeah, so there were 3 groups that were there. There were essentially 2 groups that were there to stand up against any presence from White Lives Matter, and then the Falun Gong protesters, which are kind of everywhere in Seattle. They show up they were there. They're typically on Westlake on the weekend as it is. There was a pretty significant contingent of people in Black Bloc that were there, associated with the Youth Liberation Front. ENDD as an organization really doesn't exist anymore. And the John Brown Gun Club was there. There were medics that were there. And basically it was all for naught. There was one individual that came in. We filmed the conversation, but honestly, he was talking at a really low voice, and I was going to have to invest too much time to kind of vocal enhance to get in, to get what he was saying. There's nothing horrible. It was just kind of cringeworthy. And then there was one incident with an individual in a white Chevy Suburban who ultimately drove over the sidewalk to get away from the area. As a significant group of Black Bloc members were kind of closing in on their vehicle. What we had heard is ironically, he was calling them cowards.
What? Yeah, I watched that part of the stream when that was going on. But he was calling the protesters cowards?
Yes.
Oh, geez. Okay. That's the dude.
I love your... This stuff doesn't surprise me anymore because I've just been out there so many times for it. But yeah, so.
Okay.
No police, no arrests, no violence, no nothing. You can't say that all across the country, though. Huntington Beach, California got a little sideways. That White Lives Matter rally was set up by the head of the Ku Klux Klan for the state of California. That individual imprisoned back in 2016 for stabbing multiple people at another Ku Klux Klan rally that he set up.
Yeah, that's not surprising. I know, and it's interesting to me. Like the KKK historically has kind of waxed and waned in its presence, but anytime there's any kind of racial animosity they think they can exploit, they always tend to resurface. And interestingly, it's always in like periods where we have presidents that are kind of like favorable to them. I mean, if you look back to Woodrow Wilson, there was a film, The Birth of a Nation, that kind of put on this different perspective on the Klan, because the Klan had refashioned themselves as like virtuous and protectors of white women's virtue and all of these things. And so they tend to reemerge in periods where politically it's favorable for them to come out.
Yeah, Birth of a Nation is an interesting piece of celluloid that was created and perpetuated a number of tropes about people of color that actually 100 years later still carry on today. We've had a bunch of actually interesting comments go by. Sorry, I have to point the opposite direction there. And so Shelly and Kimberly, like, which arm should you get? I got my non-dominant arm done when I got my COVID shot, but I'm a side sleeper. And so here's my advice. If you're a side sleeper, don't get the side that you sleep on. If I could go back, I would go, do my dominant arm, because I sleep on my non-dominant side, liver side down, which is actually a lot of people sleep. And It was kind of a little miserable last night when I first laid down. The other thing is, I have to call out New Orleans Blackbird, Jennifer, because I said tonight you were really rocking like an 80s vibe, and there was a comment from him that you really have the Chrissy Hyde of the Pretenders vibe going tonight, and I think he's 100% spot on.
Thank you. That is a huge compliment.
I think it is a huge compliment. She's an amazing woman, an amazing performer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she has an amazing story. She's gone through a lot of hardship, but we could save that for another time. And with that, we're going to go into our next story. Jennifer, as we cover this story tonight, the town of Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, is in, I think the word is chaos. There is tear gas, looting, violence, rubber bullets. The community is outraged, and the community is rightly so outraged.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to take place like right in the middle of the Derek Chauvin trial for, murdering George Floyd. This is like, yeah, of course, tensions are going to be heightened, and the story is so like egregious. Yeah, I know you have clips and things, so I'm going to save my commentary.
Yeah, so we're tying these together to two different stories because they highlight a problem in how the Constitution has been interpreted by the Supreme Court. I've said many times, I take the view that the Supreme Court generally gets things right, which isn't to say Dred Scott, Supreme Court got it really wrong. Supreme Court's not perfect, but I'm a constitutionalist, and generally if the Supreme Court says, then I'm like, all right, they says. Let's go to Windsor, Virginia first, and Caron Nazario. Caron Nazario was stopped by Windsor, Virginia police on December 5, 2020. He's an active duty second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. He was driving his brand new Chevy Tahoe with factory tinted windows and a paper plate taped to the back window. Anybody who's ever bought a new car has gone through this process. Police in Windsor, which, by the way, has a reputation of being a speed trap town, went to pull him over for no license plate. At the point that they were going to pull him over, he was in a very dark area. And so, for his safety and the safety of officers, he drove to a lighted area. By the way, if you do some research, you will see that police officers and police departments encourage this behavior. If you are nervous about getting stopped by traffic, you just need to acknowledge yes, I know you're there, and I'm going to pull over when we're in a safer spot. And then this happened.
Get out of the car now!
What's going on is you're fixing to ride the lightning, son.
Work with us and we'll talk to you. Get out the car.
You received an order. Obey it.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, you should be. Get out.
What's
Get out.
on? What
Get out the car.
Get out now.
I have not committed any crime.
You're being stopped for a traffic violation. You're not cooperating at this point right now. You're under arrest for you're being detained, okay? You're being detained for obstruction of justice.
Traffic violation. I do not have to get out the vehicle. You haven't even told me why I'm being stopped.
Really?
Get
out of the car now. Get out of the car.
Don't do that.
Sir.
Get out of the car now.
Hey, sir.
Get out of the car now.
Sir,
look. I'm trying to talk.
Get out.
To you.
Okay.
I'm trying to
I'm
talk.
Get out.
Just get out of my car.
Can you please
Get out.
relax?
Get out.
Please relax.
Get out of the car right now. Now.
This is not how you treat a vet. I'm actively serving this country, and this is how you're going to treat me.
Back up, Daniel.
I didn't do anything.
Back up.
Whoa, hold on.
Daniel.
What's going? Hold on. Watch it.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car now. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Please talk to
Get
me
on the
about
ground
what's
now.
going on.
Get on the ground or you're getting sprayed again. Get on the ground.
Can you please talk to me about what's
Get on the ground. Get on the ground now.
Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Can you please talk to me about what's going on?
You're not.
Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Why am I being treated like this? Why?
Because you're not cooperating. Get on the ground.
Mel just nailed it. Freaking LARPers. That was actually one of the one of the observations that I had. Nazario was ultimately released, never charged with any crime. And the officers at the end told him that if he just forgot all about this, that this was just all a terrible misunderstanding, there would be no repercussions. But if he filed a complaint or reported to their superiors, they would charge him with a bunch of stuff and maybe other things would happen to him. Officer Gutierrez, the officer that pepper sprayed that we don't see, who threatened Nazario multiple times, you're going to ride the lightning. By the way, if I'm pulled over in the South and a police officer said that to me, I'm not getting out of my fucking car, and I'm a white Jewish guy. I'm not getting out of the fucking car. I'm hitting the OnStar button at that point. Anyway, he was fired today.
Good.
So, and the good thing that he was fired, as we know, Jennifer, it's different than he resigned, because it will be harder for him to find a job in another police force, but he almost certainly will.
Oh my God, that video is insane. Did he tell him you're not, like, you need to obey? Or the dude was even, like, his hands up. He's not doing anything. He's just asking what's going on. And they're treating him like he just committed a mass murder because he's a black man. And he's a black man in uniform. Like, clearly, he's military. What the hell was going through their heads? That's all I want to know.
2016 college graduate, lieutenant in the medical corps, U.S. Army.
That's
so
insane.
that would mean, by the way, for the Chuds.
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
That he probably hasn't even eaten a hash brownie in his life or got a traffic ticket.
Wow. I mean, wow. God.
So now we go to Brooklyn Center, Jennifer. I got to call this out. This is like a nervous tick of mine where I wear a buttoned shirt that I play with the button. And I'm going to say it out loud to call myself out loud to make me go, stop it. And now that I say it, people in the comments could light me up. Say, stop touching your top button. If we go to Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, 20-year-old Dwante Wright was killed by a police officer who accidentally used their gun instead of a taser. The initial stop, Jennifer, was over an air freshener, the little tree air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror.
Find one in every car. You'll see.
A worthless piece of trivia. The reason that line is in the movie, 1984 Repo Man, is because they were a sponsor of the movie, and there literally was one of those in every car, including hanging on the handlebar of a police motorcycle. But that's what he was pulled over for. A ironic dollar store, because the dollar store in Brooklyn Center was looted tonight. So something you could get at the dollar store. He's pulled over for that. He had an outstanding warrant. Brooklyn Center Police haven't said what the outstanding warrant is, but Jennifer, we know this dance music. If he had had an outstanding warrant for something really bad, we would have already known that he had an outstanding warrant for something really bad, because smearing somebody in this situation is one of the first things they jump into in the playbook.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if we haven't heard about it, it was probably something rather benign. But I still, like, it does not register in my brain how someone can mistake a gun for a taser that served as long as this officer has in the police department.
And so with that, everything went terribly wrong with the traffic stop over an air freshener.
As I watched the video and listened to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. This appears to me, from what I viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge.
It's all good. It was an accidental discharge.
Did she say, "Oh fuck, I shot him"?
Oh, holy shit. She said, "Holy shit." Oh, wait a minute.
The F-bombs. This is
Sorry.
This is written. This is written.
Haven't had to hit that button in a while. But yeah, she said, "Holy shit, I just shot him."
Yeah. How could
That
you
is
not tell?
Officer Kimberly Potter. She's a 26-year veteran of the Brooklyn Center Police Department. I see people are lighting up the comments that we didn't do our research. We actually have a team of researchers. We don't get our information from places like OWN or Newsmax or the dark corners of the web or your uncle's brother's cousin's ex-roommate meme that go around on these particular issues. Jennifer, there should be serious consequences for a mistake. We're actually kind of going longer on the story than we wanted to, so I'm going to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. Wright's passenger, who was his girlfriend, was also injured, although they have not said how she was injured, what the injuries were. Both of these examples represent probable cause stops. The Supreme Court defines probable cause as where the facts and circumstances within the officer's knowledge and of which they have reasonable, trustworthy information are sufficient in themselves to warrant a belief by a man of reasonable caution that a crime is being committed. So let's look at Nazario's stop in Windsor, Virginia. As soon as they got to a lighted area and they saw he had a paper tag, that stop should have ended right there. The officer might have just walked up and gone, "Hey, I'm really sorry. We didn't think you had a license plate. I see. Can you just show me your paperwork on it for a minute?" Fine, it's done. When I had little kids, I got pulled over in the HOV lane on 405 on more than one occasion because you can't see the car seats. And like I would have the officer walking up and I knew I was getting pulled over for the HOV violation. And they would literally, once they could see the car seats and the little humans back there, they would literally just kind of be like, "Wave, sorry, just go." And it's like, yeah, I knew what that was about. It got to the point, if I saw a cruiser get behind me, I would tell kids, start going like this in the back seat so they could see you. So it should have just ended there. It is illegal. In the state of Minnesota, we were going to get to that, people in the comments. It is illegal in the state of Minnesota to have something hanging from your rearview mirror. But you know, I've read this document, Jennifer. It's called the Constitution, and nowhere in there does it say you get street executed for having an air freshener hanging on your rearview mirror. Even if, I'm sorry, it was an accident. I grabbed my gun instead of my taser.
Okay, so what's going on in the comments? Because they're backwards for me. Are there people trying to justify this because he illegally hung an air freshener?
Yes, there was somebody in the comments who I think has been shown the door.
Oh, good. Thanks, mods.
Who was basically saying it's illegal to... It's like, yes, we were going to get that. It's in the show notes. By the way, if you were a patron, you get access to our show notes. And it's right here in the show notes.
Did this person really say do your research?
I don't know. I don't know if that's going to like... There you go. It's right there in the show notes. Refocus, camera. There we go. There's a term for this. It's fishing expeditions. In doing some research for this story, I spent some time digging in police forums where you got to take it with a grain of salt because you really don't know if they're law enforcement officers or not, but they were talking about probable cause. And basically what a lot of officers are saying is like, I could just make up a reason in traffic enforcement for probable cause, which gets back to this Supreme Court issue. If they pull them over for the air freshener, and then they find out they've got the warrant, it just becomes a fishing expedition. There's something I remember, Jennifer. Cops to me is the original reality TV show, right? Cops has been on since the 80s. I don't think people realize how long Cops has been on the air. And I will never forget this because it left a huge impression on me. A supervisor, every now and then they get sergeants or lieutenants on the show, and there was a supervisor. I don't know what his rank was, but what he explained was that if they pull over, say, someone with a burnout brake light or a burnout tail light, 1 in 8 chance that they have a warrant. So one of the things that I walked away from in hearing that was, man, don't drive around with the brake light, or because they're not pulling you over to be the nice person to go, did you know you have a headlight out? It's just a fishing expedition. But they're using probable cause to have the expedition.
Yeah, exactly. God, I'm still reeling from the whole comments about doing your research and, trying to justify executing a man for $1 air freshener. So sorry. I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, this is the worst possible timing. We've got about a week and a half probably left in the Floyd trial. And then, it's going to go to the jury. The state is already tense, and there's a lot of chaos surrounding the Chauvin trial. And I mean, this man just lost his life because somebody couldn't differentiate between a taser and a handgun who's been on the force for more than 2 decades.
Look, I don't know how to explain this to the people in the comments. I've read the Constitution. I suggest you go back and read it. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say you get street executed for an expired license plate.
Oh, do you want the ad code for my history class? Because I could help you. I'm doing
Please provide the link where it says you get street executed for an expired license plate. The Supreme Court case. We would all love to be enlightened with your research on this. And Jennifer, I'm going to let it go at this point. We're going to do a pause for the cause, and we're going to get into the meat of this.
Can't even. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. And your generosity helps us bring stories that you matter. We love our patrons. We love those of you who provide Venmo and help us keep the lights on, literally. Jennifer, we're ready to go to our next story. And I guess the next thing I want to say, spam those hearts. Let those mods and admins know that you love the hard work that they do, because they're having to work overtime tonight, and they really need to feel that love, particularly our mod team over on Twitch. The comments over there have been interesting tonight. And so with that, let's go to our next story.
Yeah, so last week we were able to bring you guys an interview with Andrew Grant Houston, and this week we are bringing you Seattle mayoral candidate Colleen Echohawk. I was particularly excited about this interview because I am a historian, and my primary area of focus is American Indian and Indigenous history in the Pacific Northwest. And she would actually be, if elected, the first Indigenous mayor of Seattle since the office's inception in the latter part of the 19th century. So I hope you guys enjoy the first half of this interview.
Yeah, and we're going to leave the commenting section on so you can share your thoughts and discuss while we're rolling this interview. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll part one.
Hello, malcontents. This is Jennifer, and I'm here today with Seattle mayoral candidates, Colleen Echohawk. How are you doing today, Colleen?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with you.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here. So just to kind of start off, what inspired you to run for mayor of Seattle?
Well, thank you so much for asking. You know, this is a beautiful, wonderful city. I have lived here now for over 20 years, and I care deeply about our community. And I have seen, along with all of us who live here, the tremendous frustration around some policies that are just not working for our city, specifically homelessness. I have been working in homelessness now for over 7 years. I believe deeply in our homeless community. I believe that they can get to wellness and stability and housing, but we have not set up the structures that will help them get to that place of wellness. And so as the pandemic came, crashing down on us, I saw our homeless community really suffering. And then I also saw that our city was not responding in a way that, serve them well and serve the rest of our community. I think, those of us who live in the city, it's so frustrating for us because we care deeply about our community, including our homeless community. But when we see that we're not getting anywhere, it is incredibly frustrating. So that was one of the big reasons. The other thing is COVID-19. I have been serving our homeless community and our Native community for a very long time now. I know very, very well that we have some incredible disparity, some health outcomes around COVID-19 that were really hard to hear and see. In the Native community, we were 1.8 times more likely to die of COVID, more likely to be hospitalized because of COVID. And those kind of numbers were already there before the pandemic. And then as I thought about what would happen after, I realized we need leadership that understands equity, that understands racial justice, so that we can come out of this pandemic stronger, that we can address these inequities and be the kind of city that we say we are. We are a progressive, compassionate, generous city. And I look forward to the opportunity to lead with a lens of equity and justice.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think this is an excellent segue into our first question.
Great.
So Seattle is facing an ongoing crisis related to unhomed peoples. Washington State experienced a 6.2% increase in homelessness during 2019-2020, and King County spends over $1 billion per year in public and private investment in support of approximately 12,500 houseless people with disappointing results. If you were elected mayor of Seattle, how would you address this crisis? And also, as co-founder of the Coalition to End Urban Indigenous Homelessness, which aids unhomed urban Indigenous people in making positive changes that facilitate healing and wellness, can you speak to the unique challenges Indigenous people living in urban spaces like Seattle face?
Well, thank you so much for the question. And one thing we know about our homeless community here in Seattle and around the country actually is that people of color are way overrepresented in the community and the homeless community. So for instance, here in Seattle, Native people make up less than 1% of the population, but in our homeless population, we make up 15%. So an incredible disparity. That's about 1,000 to 1,100 people who are of Native people who are experiencing homelessness on the streets of Seattle. And then you think about, this city. We are named after a chief. We are a Coast Salish city at the heart of who we are as a community. And so it truly is unbelievable that we have such high rates of Native people experiencing homelessness. And even more unbelievable than that, in a city like Seattle that's very prosperous, and innovative and entrepreneurial, we have so many of our community experiencing homelessness, around 12,500 folks are experiencing homelessness, and about 3,000 to 4,000 of those are people who are going to sleep outside at night, every single night. It's truly horrific, in my opinion. It is a humanitarian crisis, and we have to do more. And as mayor of the city, I have the unique lens of actually being a homelessness provider and also a builder of affordable housing. So I know that we are going to have to take many approaches. There's not one solution to solving homelessness in our city. It'll take many approaches. Excuse me, the moment I'm elected, I will be jumping into finding solutions that are going to be kind of the all of the above approach. We need more tiny houses. We're going to need more hoteling. We're going to need safe lots for RVs and other vehicles. There will be a variety of different things for people to choose. We also need culturally appropriate case management and services. When we think about the Native community, many of our Native folks, because of the fear of government institutions, which we come to, legally, we have not found many solutions in the mainstream organizations. So I would be thinking about and supporting and innovating around Black-led services and Native-led services, so that we find cultural approaches that would serve our homeless community. And I believe that's one of the reasons we have such high rates of Native homelessness, is that we haven't had those culturally specific programs. The same for the Black community and our refugee community who are experiencing homelessness. I think that this is an exciting opportunity for our city. We have the American Relief Program coming in. We have FEMA dollars that we can use. We have we have a friend in the White House who believes so much in taking care of this issue that's not just here in Seattle, but around the country. I have worked on the national level. I founded the National Coalition in Urban Indigenous Homelessness. I'm a new board member at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So I understand what it will take, because that's the final part, is we have to build enough. I would say to anyone who lives in Seattle, let's put our frustrations behind us and let's join a campaign together to serve our homeless community, get them out of our parks and out of our right-of-ways. Our homeless community is not a place that they can thrive there. They need to thrive in housing, and then we all can be, use our parks and use our greenways. And it's just gotten really out of control, and we have to have leadership that will that understands the issue and knows how to solve it. And I'm that leader.
As a result of the ongoing COVID pandemic, economic recovery and development, as well as addressing Seattle's crumbling transit infrastructure, such as the West Seattle Bridge, is of great importance to many.
Yeah.
Moreover, some are expressing concern about large corporations and many in the workforce leaving Seattle. The question then is threefold. How do you plan on tackling the infrastructure issue, aiding in economic recovery and development as we move beyond COVID? And what concerns do you have about the loss of corporations and workers?
We know that in our city, we have some pretty severe issues around infrastructure. We have the West Seattle Bridge, the Magnolia Bridge that needs replaced. We have, streets that need to be supported. We have garbage on our streets that, I think is unacceptable. I think we should not have that in our city. And as an executive director of a pretty large nonprofit, I understand the role of the mayor as being the executive to care for our city, to care for our whole city. I have a lot of experience in homelessness, but I also have experience in management and taking care of our community. And I look forward to putting those skills into place, because we need to have shovel-ready projects. Like I mentioned earlier, we now have a friend in the White House. We have President Biden, and when he comes out with infrastructure packages, which is happening right now, we need to be ready. We need to go. I would work really closely with Patty Murray. She's the number 2 Democrat on the Senate's Appropriation Committee. I would work very closely with her and let her know what our needs are in Seattle. Also, Senator Cantwell, she chairs the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. We are so lucky to have their leadership, and I would just be excited to talk with them and share with them about what the opportunities are here in Seattle and what we absolutely need. I have a lot of experience in going after the dollars that we need to be able to take care of our community. We also know that Governor Inslee has an infrastructure plan, and I would be active in reaching out to him and ensuring that we get our needs met here
The second part of the question deals with aiding in economic recovery and development as we move beyond COVID.
We have a real reality ahead of us that it's going to take some time to recover from COVID. And we know that our economy needs to recover and our community needs to recover. In many ways, we need an opportunity to heal. And we also need people who are going to jump in and get to work immediately. About 9 months ago, I started to really understand that we can't just be focused on an economic recovery. We have to be thinking about an equitable recovery, because when our economy is equitable, then we are truly going to be able to support the whole community. So I co-founded the Equitable Recovery and Reconciliation Alliance. The idea behind our we call it ERA, the idea behind ERA is that the BIPOC community, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color community, we have a policy-driven solutions that need to be implemented, but we often don't have the voice that we need to have. And then my co-founder, his name is Ben Franz Knight, and he is the previous executive director at Pike Place Market. His role is to help our community who is really working to understand what it means to be equitable in our recovery. His role is to help them come together. So we're looking and working with things like the Downtown Seattle Association, Greater Seattle Business Partners, the Chamber of Commerce, to think about what it means to support BIPOC-led solutions. And so this is, again, an opportunity. This is a once in a generation chance to do the right thing. So I look forward to doing this in partnership with community. And I do also hope that our corporations come back into downtown Seattle and see this place as an opportunity to continue our legacy of innovation, to continue our legacy of entrepreneurship in this region. And I would be there to support them and to ensure that why we see corporations and businesses coming back into our city, that we see it with a lens of equity and racial justice. It's really an excellent and exciting opportunity.
Moving on to the topic of equity and racial justice, due to protests related to the murder of George Floyd, police violence, and ongoing racial inequality, Seattle has earned a national reputation as crime-ridden, dirty, and unsafe. At one point, the city was labeled by the previous presidential administration as an anarchist jurisdiction. Are you concerned about this narrow view of Seattle? If so, what will you do to shift this perception? And how will you address the ongoing racial inequality that exists in Seattle?
I don't know about you, but I had people calling me from around the country, friends and relatives, saying, what's going on in Seattle? It's just like an anarchist takeover. It's happening, and everything is burning. And as you know, that is not true. And I think that we really do need to be thinking about changing the narrative around Seattle. If I was elected mayor, I would see myself as an ambassador to the rest of the state and the country and the world to say, this is what Seattle is about. This is a community of amazing, progressive, generous, compassionate, entrepreneurial community, and we warmly welcome you to our city. I think that there is amazing opportunity around tourism. I hope that our Black and Indigenous and people of color-led organizations see this opportunity to think about ways that we can support the tourism industry and incubate business that maybe hasn't happened before. I think that we absolutely want to change this weird narrative that's happened around Seattle and show who we really are. I've also talked to people, in the suburbs of Seattle, and they say things like, "Oh, Seattle, traffic's too bad," just kind of complaining about Seattle. I want to change that narrative too. I want people to remember that we have the Kraken, and we have the Mariners and the Seahawks, and we have a thriving nightlife and restaurants that people want to come to. And let's make this a great place for people to celebrate big celebrations and to come to sporting events and to be, coming to our wonderful arenas. I just think it's a really cool opportunity that I look forward to jumping into. No one loves the city more than I do. My sister, when I was thinking about running for mayor, and I also had an opportunity out in Washington, D.C., she's like, Colleen, you love Seattle. Like, why would you go to Washington, D.C.? I'm like, you're totally right. I love this place. And I just am going to do the best I can to lift it up and tell and celebrate the city and let the world know what a great community we truly are.
Yeah, so definitely has a lot of passion and enthusiasm for Seattle, and I think that's very evident in the first part of her interview. In the second half of the interview, we get into a little bit deeper conversation as we did with the first candidate, and I have a couple questions that are, I think, a little bit more specific to her because she is would be the first Indigenous mayor were she elected.
Yeah, what we'll do a little pause for the cause. We'll call out the potato scones, and then we're going to go ahead. We'll come back to you, Jennifer, and we'll do part 2.
Okay.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is located in Shoreline, Washington. They have amazing coffee. They have an amazing merch, and they have potato scones. It is like the fluffiest, most amazing scone you've ever had in your life. Had a baby with a baked potato that has cheese and onion in it. You need to get the potato scones. Check their hours online because they wiggle a little bit from time to time. Jennifer, go ahead and introduce up the second part of the interview.
So yeah, just like the last mayoral candidate, Andrew Houston, we have a similar set of questions related to police reform and taxes. But I also have a very direct question for her about what it would mean for her to be the first Indigenous mayor of Seattle. We also had a conversation that we had to edit for time that I'm hoping we get to air eventually about this really interesting great program she has for Native women leaders. It's a town hall program. So we did talk about that, but unfortunately in the interest of time had to cut it. But yeah, it was a really great conversation. If you're interested in Native women leaders and the town hall she holds, I would totally check out her Facebook page because that's where she posts the information.
In addressing like the racial inequality piece, how would you work to kind of move beyond that and think more critically about solutions for the ongoing racial inequality that exists within Seattle?
We have some significant issues in our city around this. We are a progressive city, but we don't always live out our progressive values. And I hope to really inspire, encourage, and envision with everyone about what that could really look like. I'll give you an example. We struggle right now with with housing for our Black community. Our Black community has been pushed out of the Central District. And we also know that essential workers can't afford to live here. And a lot of them are people of color. We have to be, if we believe that Black Lives Matter, if we believe in our progressive values, that means we believe in housing for them. That means we believe in the incubation of small businesses that are owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And so I hope to truly help our communities, our neighbors understand that value and understand that when we do practice equity and racial justice, that it's good for our whole community. It's not just good for the Black and Indigenous and people of color communities, it's good for everyone. And that's going to be super exciting for us as a community.
And so when compared to the West Coast cities of Portland, San Francisco, San Jose, Sacramento, Oakland, San Diego, Seattle has the second highest cost per police officer, tied with Oakland, and the second highest officer per capita behind San Francisco. Additionally, the average officer makes $153,000 a year before benefits, according to the Seattle Times. Despite this large force and supporting budget, Seattle Police report slow response times and claim the issue is a lack of staffing. The budget was cut approximately 18% and staffing levels were adjusted to support roughly 1,325 officers. How would you define defund the police? What is your position? And how would you go about restoring community, particularly BIPOC community trust in the Seattle Police Department?
Yeah, this is something that is of grave concern for me. You know, I got my start in working in the police reform arena after the murder of John T. Williams. It's still jarring. It's still kind of just unbelievable. Native people have the highest rates of being shot by police around the country. And we're a very small part of the population. We have to do better. And, you know, as I look at our whole city, we need to make sure that our police department is accountable and transparent. We need a reset of the police department from top to bottom. And I'm always open to looking at our pay structure for absolutely. I also believe that part of the mayor's job is to find an excellent chief of police and hold that chief of police accountable for our police officers that are out there. I've also been on the Community Police Commission, and I know the issues really well. I mean, our reform since, again, the murder of John T. Williams and the consent decree, it's been a decent start, but it's also failed us, as we saw over the summer. We have a real problem when we see officers hiding their badges during protests. We still see incredible racial disparity in arrests, and this is one of my top priorities if I'm elected. We will find a chief of police to will hold our Seattle Police Department accountable. The issues of race disparity in our police department, we do absolutely have to think of a cultural shift in that department. And that starts straight from the chief all the way down to every single police officer, to someone out there on the beat. There is an accountability that absolutely has to happen from the community. And I look forward to continuing to evaluate our reform system as is. I think that there is a lot of room for us to strengthen it. And I would look forward to hearing from community about community-led solutions that will ensure that we have a police department that is not just, they're not warriors, but they are guardians, that they are there to support the community in times of incredible, significant need. And until we get there, we have to have a mayor that will hold them accountable. And I can tell you that that is a passion of mine, something I look forward to doing. And if elected, that would be one of my top priorities.
On the topic of police accountability and reform, one of the many things COVID has shed light on is the ongoing mental health crisis in the country. Seattle is not exempt from this. Recently, a man in the throes of a mental health crisis was fatally wounded by SVE near the Seattle waterfront. Would you consider implementing something similar to the STAR program in Colorado, which replaces traditional law enforcement responders with a medic and mental health professional for some emergency calls as a way to de-escalate situations where there's a clear mental health component?
Absolutely. I support finding new ways to support folks who are experiencing mental health crises. I can tell you from personal experience, working with someone in our homelessness community that pulled a knife in my day center at Chief Seattle Club, and I saw a social worker de-escalate the situation in less than a minute. So it was heartbreaking because I've seen this with my own eyes. It was incredibly heartbreaking for me when I saw son, uncle, nephew down there on Alaska Way with a knife who was many feet away from these officers, and then he was shot and killed. That was heartbreaking for me. And those are the kinds of things that should be taken out of the hands of our Seattle Police Department. I absolutely support community innovation around new ways to support mental health in our system. And I will also say that we have to get to the Washington State Legislature as well. We know that Washington State is vastly behind in supporting mental health in our system. I think that as we work so hard to support our homeless community, it can be absolutely heartbreaking when you see someone who needs that support and we have nowhere to send him. We have to fix that. And that's going to take courageous leadership. It's going to take decisive leadership, and it's going to take innovation. And I believe I'm the right leader for those kinds of issues going on in our community.
So you talked a little bit earlier about the necessity of affordable housing. 8% of Seattle's land that is zoned for housing is zoned for single-family housing. Over the last 5 years, most of the new construction centered in the 12% that supports highly dense housing. Developers and builders focused on small footprint properties with minimal parking and luxury appointments. Housing affordability is a major problem for Seattle, as you've noted already. Do you support changing zoning rules for ADUs and more dense construction to alleviate the housing crisis? And what changes would you support?
Absolutely. You know, we have a lot of competing challenges before us. Like, we haven't really talked yet about climate crisis, but those are there are intersections there, and housing affordability emergency is upon us right now, and we need to be thoughtful and creative about creating more density in our city, creating opportunities for, you know, creating more housing that really truly works for our community. I absolutely believe in transit-oriented development. I think that our backyard cottages are amazing. And then I think we need to think about how we build affordable housing that truly does not encourage gentrification, but encourages you know, our Black and Indigenous and people of color that communities to come back into Seattle. I have worked on the community preference policy. I think that is a really excellent way to get started, and I think that there is just tremendous opportunity around affirmative marketing for some of our affordable housing that's being built. We have to change our zoning laws if we're going to truly address our climate crisis and our housing affordability.
Seattle has a reputation for having high taxes compared to other Washington cities. A number of initiatives have added incremental taxes to fund transit, homeless programs, education, and the general fund. These taxes are small on paper, 0.1%, for example, but most of these taxes are regressive due to Washington state's tax structure. Will you pledge no new taxes for Seattle?
I take a people first approach on this, and I think that we absolutely need to understand the impact of a sales tax on our community. And it is not fair, it is not just, and we need to do better. Now, we have certain legal issues around an income tax, and we need to find new ways to generate revenue. So I would not say no. I will not incur any new taxes, but I think I want to incur the right kind of taxes, the taxes that are fair. I think a capital gains tax is really interesting and something that I would absolutely explore. But I believe that we in this city understand our responsibility to our homeless community, to community that is hurting and suffering. In a city like Seattle, we should not have, you know, the amounts of poverty that we have in some of our communities. We should not have, you know, health inequities that we have, and that's going to take some money. And we need to understand, we need to continue to understand that. And I look forward to working with community about what the kind of investments that we want to make.
Indigenous peoples are leading the efforts to bring about many meaningful changes globally, nationally, and locally. If elected, you would be the first Indigenous mayor of Seattle since the office's inception in 1869, something that is long overdue. Can you speak to the significance of what being elected mayor of Seattle would mean both to you personally and what it potentially signifies for Native nations and communities more broadly?
I started thinking about running for mayor because I care about the city and I care about our homeless community, and I know I have the right kind of solutions. Being an Indigenous mayor kind of just was part of, like, you know, who I am. And as I started thinking about it and understanding it more, it's become more important. You know, I have two amazing, beautiful children, and I want them to understand and know that it's normal for a Native woman to be the mayor of a city, because I didn't have that growing up. You know, when Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland were elected into Congress, I have goosebumps thinking about it right now. Like, it just was so unbelievable to me. People who I know understand and know and understand where I come from. To have that kind of representation, it matters. Before I announced, I talked to leaders of the Coast Salish communities, and because I'm in their land right now. I am not Coast Salish, I'm Pawnee. And then I also talked to some of my elders, and my one elder said to me, Colleen, you need to remember that in our language, leader means servant. And you need to remember that as you are trying out this new thing, that you are a servant to this community. And I take that seriously. I take that soberly, that if elected mayor, that I would be a servant to this community. I would lead from a place of humility and a place of understanding the issues that are in this community, and that I have the right kind of solutions. And there are different solutions. I think it's time for new ideas and new people to be in elected office, and it's exciting, and I take it seriously, and I hope I win. I hope I'm that first person.
Yeah, again, she's clearly very passionate about Seattle and has a lot of, really good ideas she's worked in homelessness, worked dealing with unhomed peoples, particularly Native peoples who make up a predominant sector of the unhomed population in Seattle for being a small amount of the population that exists within the city. So I think she has some really interesting ideas for that. I'm curious to see more about her platform, especially as it relates to climate change.
Yeah, it was a great interview. It was great hearing her platform. She's one of my first impressions, and so people understand. I'm operating actually as engineer in these interviews. I'm literally just there in the capacity for technology. She is really charismatic, and it just came across even through the Zoom format, this virtual meeting format. She is really charismatic.
Yeah, no, she definitely is extremely vivacious. Like I said, passionate about city. She clearly loves Seattle and has a lot of wonderful things to say about it. And I think she could make some, really great contributions to trying to find some solutions for the unhomed problem. Crisis that we're facing is a better word.
Jennifer, the next mayoral candidate that we're interviewing is Lorena Garcia.
Lorena Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, yes, yes, thank you. Lorena Gonzalez, not the cook, not the celebrity chef Lorena Garcia, Lorena Gonzalez, yes.
I'm hungry, David. Did the potato scones, you're like, oh, I gotta think about food, and that's what came out?
Now that you say that, actually, my gears are turning on what I'm going to go eat. I haven't eaten much today because not feeling well, and I'm like on that other side of the curve now. And yeah. I am actually kind of feeling the David hungry at the moment. So we ran a little over, but we're almost to the finish line. We'll do a quick pause for the cause, and we'll go into the last story.
Okay.
As a dark cloud hangs over Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, for another police-involved shooting or another police-involved death under... I'm having a really hard time saying with a straight face. This is what it was like. We're trying to move more into journalism, but damn it. Under questionable circumstances. I say it through clenched teeth.
You're not the same. I'm an American. You're a sick asshole.
Jennifer, you've got our Chauvin trial update du jour. So tell us what's going on.
So more testimony from medical professionals came on Friday that determined George Floyd's death was indeed the result of asphyxiation caused by the weight of Derek Chauvin's knee across his neck for an extended period of time. And I believe you have a clip we can roll before I delve into the rest.
This week, medical expert after expert drew this conclusion. George Floyd did not die because of drugs.
I believe the primary mechanism of death is asphyxia or low oxygen. There's no evidence to suggest he would have died that night, except for the interactions with law enforcement.
And today, highly anticipated testimony from the Hennepin County Medical Examiner, Dr. Andrew Baker, the only person to conduct an initial autopsy on Floyd.
I was aware that at least one video had gone viral on the internet, but I intentionally chose not to look at that until I had examined Mr. Floyd. I did not want to bias my exam by going in with any preconceived notions.
Baker determined that Floyd's cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest. In other words, that his heart and lungs stopped while he was being subdued, restrained, and compressed by police officers.
In my opinion, the law enforcement subdual, restraint, and the neck compression was just more than Mr. Floyd could take by virtue of those heart conditions.
The manner of Floyd's death, Baker found, was homicide, but the autopsy report did not mention asphyxia or lack of oxygen. It did mention fentanyl and meth in Floyd's system. Derek Chauvin's attorney has seized on that, arguing that those drugs and underlying medical conditions killed Floyd, not Chauvin's knee on his neck.
Have you certified deaths as an overdose where the level of fentanyl was similar to the level of fentanyl in Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
But as Baker told the prosecution,
Mr. Floyd's use of fentanyl did not cause the subdual or neck restraint. His heart disease did not cause the subdual or the neck restraint.
For Floyd's family, this week's testimony has been gut-wrenching. Floyd's niece left the courtroom after seeing the video of her uncle's death again.
It's very hard and emotional in there. They just watched him die until he was lifeless. They sat on him like he was an animal or something.
Gabe, prosecutors have now called a remarkable 35 witnesses. What's next?
Well, the prosecution is expected to rest its case early next week. Then the defense takes center stage. Lester, the biggest question, will Chauvin himself testify?
And that really is the big question. And we talked about that, I think, that last week. I speculated on, will he testify? My understanding in trials like this, an individual may testify on their behalf if they feel it's kind of the two polar opposites. If they feel that this is a slam dunk, they'll testify, or if they feel like they are just absolutely going down in flames and they've got nothing left to lose. If they feel it's somewhere in the middle, as I come to understand and talking to some lawyers, generally the defendant will not testify on their own behalf. By the way, if it's going like stellar good, they're not going to put them up there on the risk of having them blow it up.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to testify. And I think he's going to testify because he seems like the type of person to me that is going to want to plead his own case and try to defend his actions. I don't know if his attorney's going to advise against that. I mean, to me, again, we watch it and we're like, this is cut and dry. He murdered this man. But, the jurors are like, well, there's always that, was he, was it the drugs? Was it this? Was it that? Everybody has pre-existing biases, regardless of, how much interrogation they did of the jurors to kind of vet for that. But there are some other interesting things that happened today. Well, just a little bit to follow up on the examiner. The examiner did state that Floyd had a pre-existing condition, heart disease, and had used fentanyl and meth. Again, these were contributors to his death, but not the primary cause of death. There is a difference. Eric Nelson also asked the judge to sequester jurors in the wake of protests arising from the shooting death of Daunte Wright, who was shot and killed by a Minnesota Police Department during a routine traffic stop. We discussed this, but the judge refused, stating that he would only sequester after closing arguments, which are slated to begin the week after next, I believe, because I don't think at this point the defense has many witnesses they're going to call. And so it's anticipated by analysts that they will be completed by the end of next week, and then the closing arguments will, of course, take place, and then the jurors will go into sequester to kind of deliberate. So in addition to medical examiners and other expert witnesses who weighed in on the use of force by Chauvin, Floyd's brother also testified. He stated that he was a leader within their family, and while character testimony generally doesn't carry much weight in these kinds of trials, given the defense's attempted character assassination of George Floyd, this seems particularly important testimony and likely a much-needed reprieve for jurors who had been sitting through countless hours of expert jargon-filled testimony. One of the more problematic and, pretty much disgusting things that happened today via the defense attorney Eric Nelson attempted to argue that, quote, just because it's not very pretty doesn't mean that it's not lawful, end quote. When referring to Chauvin's restraint of Floyd that resulted in Floyd's death, this is like statement is part of Nelson's lawful but awful defense of his client, which demonstrates the impunity of police officers.
When we look at incidents like have happened with George Floyd, and we look at what just happened in Brooklyn Center is a really good example of why qualified immunity is so absolutely flawed. Because, Jennifer, I would say before George Floyd, if this I grabbed my gun by accident was the excuse in 2016 or 2017, this would be page 5 news in the local area, and people would just shrug it off.
Yep, exactly. I mean, there has to be there's got to be accountability. And I just feel like people are not going to rest until there is some accountability now. This death of this man, this murder of this man by Derek Chauvin, really instigated these large-scale protests and this movement for police accountability that I don't think is going to stop. And here we have another Black man who's been shot during a routine traffic stop because somebody could differentiate between a taser and a handgun. And what happens in say 2 weeks when we have a decision on this? This could go one of a couple ways. And, I don't know. I still have this feeling that he is not going to get what he deserves for the murder of this man. I just don't, because I think people have implicit biases. We do. I'm a historian. I know that I have implicit biases, and you have to be able to go, okay, we need to account for this and we need to add nuance to the story.
All it takes is one juror. Every day that you bring this up, and I say it probably to the point that the malcontents are like, oh, he just said it again. We get it, David. It only takes one juror. It only takes one juror.
Hire a juror, and he's going to get off.
Right. One juror, and that's it. All it takes is one juror. I'm not convinced.
I think it was drugs. It's just one.
And what happened in Brooklyn Center yesterday has just added to the angst to that community. And I think people think of Minneapolis, St. Paul as another area that is, like Seattle being, Minneapolis, St. Paul. They read, they're all college educated. They're woke. And it's there's nowhere in this country that's woke if there's anything that's been demonstrated in the last 24 months. And for people that are, there's people that identify on the far left are liberals. And it's so funny because this word liberal gets just mutilated on both sides. But there is a significant chunk of people that lean on the left side that are very performative. And I think that's the word instead of, it's just liberals. No, it's performative. They put that Black Lives Matter sign out in front of their house. They hashtag. I gave $25 to the NAACP. I made my profile picture black for a week, right? And it's see, I helped fix the problem. And it's no, you didn't do jack squat. It was just performative to make other people around you go, oh, look at the wonderful things you do.
Yeah, no, and these are the same people that will still cross the street anytime they see a Black person on the same side of the road, right? It is totally performative, and Seattle is so hypocritical in that context. We want to be all woke and progressive and all this and all that, but we are so not. And we're majority white, and it's so difficult for the people in this city to grasp that just because you do these performative gestures doesn't mean that you're actually doing the work.
Exactly. monitoring, if you see me looking down malcontents, is because I've got a couple of mobile devices down here. I got Unicorn Riot going. I've got streams in Seattle that are going. So I'm kind of watching a couple of things. It looks like in Brooklyn Center, there's almost like a military grade. It looks like Ferguson in 2014. There's like this military grade response at this point.
Yeah.
But it does look like it's calmed down. The weather there is shit, and it's pushing midnight there, I believe.
Yes, it is.
And Seattle, things I would say are chippy, but not crazy.
Yeah, no, I was watching a little bit of the streams when the interview was playing because they were in the chat. Yeah, no, things are not going to get any less tense before the end of this trial. If anything, I think tensions are going to be exacerbated, especially when the defense tries to bring their case and their witnesses forward, because it's going to be extremely hostile. It's going to perpetuate numerous problematic stereotypes that they've already tried to perpetuate in the courtroom. And unfortunately, the vast majority of Americans have those stereotypes ingrained into their brains from K through 12, like their entire lives. So to say that those aren't going to somehow factor into their existing implicit biases is comical to me, honestly.
Well, we'll continue to, as we say, monitor the stories. Wednesday, because we now do 3 days a week. We ran a little over today because I think Jennifer and I got really fired up on the probable cause stops story. Yeah. And we got rerouted on a lot of the comments that were flowing there. I was actually surprised at all the comments that were coming on that. We're doing 3 shows a week. So our next show is on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we have Nikita Oliver, who is running for Seattle City Council for the 9th seat, 9th position. And Renee Rackney sat down with her and did an interview. And we'll be airing that on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see their interview. And and I hope that, I just want to say that everybody so far that we've approached for mayoral candidates, their campaigns have been super friendly to us, super attentive, very responsive. And so I hope everybody that watches these, takes a few minutes to really listen to their platform, because who is the next mayor of Seattle is very important because they have a pretty big mess to clean up.
Yes, they have a lot of messes to clean up, whoever it is. And I agree with you, Jennifer. I mean, I personally don't live in Seattle. I can't vote in the election. What happens in Seattle impacts the region. And if you live in Seattle, especially considering the last 3 to 4 mayors, and on a couple of key issues, basically total inaction, I really think you should have your pulse on this mayoral race. And I think on this particular mayoral race, you should be throwing in the trash can. They're left, they're right, they did this or they did that. I think you have to really look at, what do you really think they can deliver, and in what areas do you think that they could really address? Seattle's a wonderful city, but Seattle has a lot of unaddressed problems.
Yeah, and we have numerous BIPOC candidates, which is extremely exciting, and the potential for the first Indigenous mayor in, 150, 60 years. That's a big thing.
Yeah, and tomorrow we will have the story up that will have the entire transcript of the interview that Jennifer did with Colleen Echohawk. And again, on Wednesday, we're going to have Nikita Oliver on the show. Really excited about that. Thursday, we have Malcontented Minutes, and we'll see what happens on that. Jennifer, another story that we're doing on Wednesday, it's an East Side story. They are doing a promotion to support restaurants. There's about 7 to 10 Chamber of Commerces on the East Side that have all banded together, along with a friend of ours, Angela Roslin, who we've had on the show. And we're going to be talking about that. That restaurant week on the East Side will be starting on April 19th. We're real excited to share that on Wednesday. So with that, Malcontents, thank you so much. Please support independent journalism. We can't do this without you, without our patrons, without our Venmo supporters. We love you. We appreciate you. Please consider doing it. We actually now have a patron tier that is $2 a month. That's it. $2 a month. It's like 6 cents a day. and you get to keep seeing our smiling faces 3 days a week. Jennifer, again on Wednesday.
Yes. Good night, everyone. Come back Wednesday, get a potato scone, all that good stuff.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Antifa, fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.